The proximity alert wailed across the bridge of the CSV Dauntless, cutting through the usual hum of systems and low conversations. Captain Mira Solis snapped to attention, her weathered features tightening as the holographic display materialized before her. Multiple signatures detected. Captain, large vessels approaching from the outer system boundary, reported Lieutenant Jackson Reed, his fingers dancing across the tactical console. Energy signatures match known Marauder configurations. Mira's stomach nodded. She'd been expecting this day for months, had prepared as best she could with the limited resources available to Viridian Prime's defense flotilla. But preparation and readiness were two very different things. "How many?" she asked, her voice level despite the tension coiling within her. 7 capital ships, ma'am, including what appears to be the Crimson Scythe. A murmur rippled through the bridge crew. The Crimson Scythe was infamous throughout the frontier systems, the dreadnought flagship of Warlord Dathravas, the most feared of the Marauder clan leaders. Its appearance alone had been enough to force the surrender of 3 colonies in the past year. "Sound general quarters," Mira ordered, "and get me Governor Arden." As klaxons blared throughout the ship, Mira stared at the approaching fleet. The Dauntless was a retrofitted frigate, originally designed for patrol duties, not confronting a Marauder battle group. And the rest of her flotilla consisted of 4 smaller vessels, converted mining ships and outdated Confederation patrol boats that had been deemed too obsolete to recall when the Confederation had withdrawn most of its military presence from the outer systems. The holographic communicator flickered to life, revealing the lined face of Governor Cale Arden. Even through the static-laced transmission, Mira could see the fear in his eyes. "Captain Solis, please tell me this is a drill," he said, his voice strained. "I'm afraid not. Governor, Marauder fleet, 7 ships including the Crimson Scythe. They'll be within weapons range of the orbital station in approximately 4 hours. Arden's face seemed to age a decade in seconds. "Have you alerted the Confederation Council? My communications officer is sending the distress call now, but—" She left the thought unfinished. They both knew the reality. The Confederation's nearest rapid response fleet was stationed at Proxima Centauri, nearly 3 weeks away at standard FTL speeds. And in recent years, the Council had made it abundantly clear that frontier colonies like Viridian Prime were low on their list of priorities. "I understand," Arden said after a moment. "What are our options?" Mira squared her shoulders. "We fight, sir. We show these pirates that Viridian Prime isn't an easy target. With 5 ships against 7 Marauder vessels, including a dreadnought?" Arden's voice held no rebuke, only the weary resignation of a leader forced to face impossible odds. "I've activated our emergency defense protocols. Every civilian vessel with functional weapon systems is being called in. We'll position the orbital defense platforms at key approach vectors." Mira's mind raced through contingencies, strategies, anything that might buy them time. "And I've still got a few tricks that Warlord Voss won't be expecting." Arden nodded slowly. "Do what you can, Captain. I'll begin emergency preparations on the ground. If this goes badly—" "It won't," Mira interrupted, with more conviction than she felt. "We've held off raiders before." "Not like this," Arden replied softly. "Not Dathravas." The communication ended, and Mira turned back to her crew, all watching her with varying degrees of apprehension. "Lieutenant Reed, assemble the flotilla commanders for an emergency briefing. Chief Engineer Vanya, I need every ounce of power you can squeeze from our engines and weapon systems." She paused, meeting each of their gazes in turn. "I know what we're facing. I know the odds. But Viridian Prime is our home, and those people down there are counting on us." Reed nodded, his expression resolute despite the fear she could see behind his eyes. "Yes, Captain." As her bridge crew returned to their duties with renewed purpose, Mira activated her personal terminal and input a series of encryption codes known to only a handful of people in the outer systems. It was a long shot, a desperate play. But she'd learned long ago that sometimes hope was as powerful a weapon as any railgun or plasma torpedo. The message was simple. Viridian Prime under Marauder siege. Crimson Scythe present. Request immediate assistance. She addressed it to Admiral Helena Voss, Earth Defense Command. Then, taking a deep breath, Mira Solis prepared to face the coming storm. 48 hours. That was the ultimatum delivered by Warlord Dathra Voss, once his fleet had taken up position around Viridian Prime. 48 hours for the colony to surrender 1/3 of its refined ore production, half of its medical supplies, and 20 of its ships to be repurposed for the Marauder cause. And if we refuse? Governor Arden had asked during the tense communication, his voice remarkably steady despite the threat hanging over his people. Voss had smiled then, a cold expression that never reached his cybernetically enhanced eyes. Then, I will demonstrate the new capabilities of the Crimson Scythe's main cannon on your orbital station. After that, we'll move on to population centers. Now, in the emergency command center established beneath Viridian Prime's main settlement, Governor Arden faced the colony's leadership council. The room was thick with tension. Voices raised as various factions argued their positions. "We should evacuate while we can," insisted Councillor Eliza Tan, her hands pressed flat against the conference table. "We have enough transport capacity to move at least 60% of the population to the southern continent. It's uninhabited, mountainous. We could hide there until help arrives." "And abandon our homes, our livelihoods," countered Mining Guild Representative Jorgen Hask. "Everything we've built over 20 years? Better than sacrificing lives for ore," Tan shot back. Arden raised his hands for silence. "The Marauders have deployed interdiction fields. No ship larger than a single-person shuttle can leave the system without being intercepted. And Captain Solis informs me that their fleet is positioned to bombard the southern continent as easily as our main settlements." He took a weary breath. "Evacuation is not a viable option." "Then we give them what they want," said Colony Treasurer Marcus Wells. His voice, tight with fear, barely held in check. "We can rebuild our stockpiles. We can replace ships. We can't replace people." Dr. Alara Miles, the colony's chief medical officer, shook her head emphatically. "Half our medical supplies? Do you have any idea what that would mean for our hospitals? For the outlying clinics? We're already stretching our resources thin after last month's viral outbreak." "And this wouldn't be a one-time payment," added Security Chief Dawes grimly. "Once the Marauders know we'll cave to threats, they'll be back, again and again, until there's nothing left to take." The arguments continued, fears and tempers rising, until Arden's communicator chimed with an incoming transmission from the orbital station. He activated it immediately, and Captain Solis's face appeared above the device. "Governor, we've just received word from the Confederation Council," she reported, her expression carefully neutral. Arden felt a flicker of hope. "They're sending help?" Mira's jaw tightened. "They've acknowledged our distress call and expressed their grave concern for the situation on Viridian Prime. But the nearest Confederation battle group is currently engaged in exercises near Tau Ceti. They estimate it would take them at least 17 days to reach us." She paused. "They've advised us to seek a diplomatic solution to the current crisis." A bitter laugh escaped Hask. "Diplomatic solution? With Dathra Voss?" Arden closed his eyes briefly. He wasn't surprised. Not really. The Confederation had been gradually withdrawing its military presence from the frontier for years, focusing its resources on the more established core worlds and their profitable trade routes. Colonies like Viridian Prime, resource-rich but politically insignificant, were increasingly left to fend for themselves. "So we're on our own," he said finally. Mira's expression hardened. "Not entirely, sir. I've been in contact with other defense forces in nearby systems. 3 independent patrol ships from Helios Station have volunteered to join us. The mining consortium on Vega's Drift is sending 2 armed freighters." A hint of pride entered her voice. And every pilot with combat experience on Viridian has volunteered for the Defense Force. We're arming and retrofitting every ship we can. Arden studied her face, seeing the determination there, but also the realism. How many ships, total? 23, sir. Most of them lightly armed, but they'll help strengthen our defensive perimeter. Against 7 Marauder warships. Yes, sir. A heavy silence fell over the command center. 23 cobbled-together vessels against 7 purpose-built warships, including one of the most notorious dreadnoughts in the frontier. Captain, Arden said slowly, what are our chances, realistically? Mira didn't flinch from the question. If our goal is to defeat the Marauder fleet, virtually 0. Before the despair could fully settle over the room, she continued. But if our goal is to hold them off, to make attacking Viridian Prime so costly that Voss decides we're not worth the trouble. Her eyes glinted with fierce determination. Then I'd say we have a fighting chance. Arden straightened, drawing strength from her resolve. Then that's what we'll do. No surrender, no concessions. He looked around at the colony's leadership. We will not be intimidated into submission. Viridian Prime stands its ground. There were nods of agreement, some reluctant, others firm. Even Treasurer Wells, after a moment's hesitation, gave a grim nod. Captain Solis, Arden continued, you have full authority to coordinate our defense. Whatever resources you need, they're yours. Thank you, sir. There's one more thing. Mira leaned closer to the communicator. My engineers have detected unusual activity in some of our defense systems. Code sequences that don't match our protocols. We believe there may be saboteurs working within our infrastructure. A chill ran through Arden. Marauder agents? Most likely. They've been known to infiltrate colonies before launching major attacks. I'll have Security Chief Dawes begin an immediate investigation, Arden promised. Anything else? Mira's expression softened slightly. Just this, sir. Whatever happens, it's been an honor serving as Viridian Prime's defender. She straightened, saluting. Dauntless out. As the communication ended, Arden turned to face the expectant faces of his council. You heard the captain, he said, his voice finding new strength. We have 45 hours to prepare. Let's make every minute count. The hangar bay of Orbital Station Viridian was a hive of frantic activity. Maintenance crews worked around the clock, retrofitting civilian vessels with hastily mounted weapon systems. Pilots ran through emergency simulations, many of them former military who had settled on Viridian Prime, seeking a quieter life, now pressed back into service by dire necessity. Captain Mira Solis moved through the organized chaos, inspecting modifications, conferring with squadron leaders, offering encouragement where needed. Her presence alone seemed to steady nerves and focus attention, a skill she'd honed through 15 years of Confederation service before taking command of Viridian's modest defense force. Captain, Lieutenant Reed approached, datapad in hand. The last of the volunteer ships from Helios Station have arrived. That brings our total to 27 vessels. Mira nodded, taking the datapad and scanning the updated roster. What about the defense platform diagnostics? Reed's expression tightened. 3 of the 7 orbital platforms are showing critical system failures. Chief Engineer Vanya believes it's definitely sabotage. Someone reprogrammed the targeting systems to fail once activated. Can they be fixed? Vanya says yes, but it'll take time. Time we don't have much of. Mira handed back the datapad. Tell her to focus on the 4 functional platforms. Position them to cover our most vulnerable approaches. She glanced up at the massive viewport that dominated one wall of the hangar, where the distant shapes of Marauder vessels hung against the starfield, silent and menacing. What about our little surprise for Warlord Voss? A hint of a smile crossed Reed's usually stoic features. The mining drones have been successfully modified, 50 units, each carrying enough explosive material to damage a cruiser's hull, They're awaiting deployment orders. Good. And the communication protocols? Encrypted and isolated from our main systems. If there are more saboteurs aboard, they won't be able to warn the Marauders. Mira nodded approvingly. In her years, fighting pirates and raiders, she'd learned that surprise was often the only advantage the outnumbered and outgunned could claim. The mining drones, normally used to break up asteroids for resource extraction, had been converted into makeshift suicide bombers. Their identification transponders recoded to appear as debris. "Captain Solis!" a voice called from across the hangar. Mira turned to see Dr. Alara Miles, making her way toward them. Her medical uniform rumpled, as if she'd been wearing it for days. Which, Mira realized, she probably had. "Dr. Miles," Mira greeted her. "Shouldn't you be preparing your medical teams?" Alara's normally composed features were drawn with tension. "I've just come from the Environmental Control Center. Something's wrong with the life support systems." Mira frowned. "Explain." "The oxygen recyclers are showing microscopic fluctuations. Nothing dangerous yet, but the pattern is consistent with calibration tampering." Alara lowered her voice. "If left unchecked for another 12 hours, the oxygen levels throughout the station would have dropped below critical thresholds. We'd have had mass hypoxia across all decks." "Another act of sabotage," Reed muttered. "I've reset the systems and placed security personnel at all access points," Alara continued. "But this was sophisticated work. Whoever did it knows our infrastructure intimately." The implications were disturbing. Not just external threats, but enemies within. Perhaps people they passed in corridors every day. Trusted colleagues who had been turned or planted by the Marauders. "Doctor," Mira said after a moment's thought, "I want you to coordinate with security. Check the access logs for all critical systems over the past month. Look for patterns, anomalies, anything unusual." "I'm a medical doctor, not a security specialist," Alara protested. "Which is exactly why I'm asking you. You have no connections to the security protocols, no access to sensitive systems outside medical. You're one of the few people I can be certain isn't compromised." Mira held the doctor's gaze. "Can I count on you?" Alara straightened her shoulders. "Of course, Captain. I'll start immediately." As Alara departed, Reed moved closer to Mira. "Captain, if we have infiltrators at this level—" "I know," Mira said quietly. "It means the Marauders have been planning this for months, possibly years. This isn't just a raid. They want Viridian Prime." She turned to face the viewport again, eyes fixed on the distant shape of the Crimson Scythe. "Which means Dathra Voss won't be satisfied with tribute. Whatever he's told Governor Arden, this ends with occupation or destruction." "Then we need to change the calculation," Reed said. "Make him believe that taking Viridian would cost more than it's worth." Mira nodded slowly. "That's exactly what we're going to do." She activated her communicator. "All squadron leaders to Briefing Room Alpha in 30 minutes. It's time to finalize our defense strategy." As they made their way from the hangar, Mira felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. 27 ships against 7 Marauder vessels, but those 7 included a dreadnought with firepower equivalent to her entire makeshift fleet. The odds were beyond daunting. But Mira Solis had never been one to surrender to odds. And there was still her message to Admiral Voss, a desperate hope, but hope nonetheless. If there was even a chance that help might come, she would ensure that Viridian Prime held out long enough to receive it. In the secure communications center aboard the Earth Defense Command flagship Resolute, Admiral Helena Voss stood motionless before the holographic display. The message from Viridian Prime played for the 3rd time, Captain Solis's voice tight with controlled urgency. "Viridian Prime under Marauder siege. Crimson Scythe present. Request immediate assistance." The timestamp indicated the message had been sent nearly 30 hours ago. Given the distance and the limitations of FTL communications, that meant the situation on Viridian was likely even more dire now. Analysis confirms it's definitely the Crimson Scythe. Admiral, reported Commander Tanner from his station. Long-range scans show 7 Marauder vessels in standard siege formation around Viridian Prime. Voss's expression remained impassive, but internally, her mind raced through calculations and contingencies. The Crimson Scythe wasn't just any Marauder vessel. It represented a significant escalation in Voss's campaign of terror across the frontier systems. If he succeeded in taking Viridian Prime, with its rich mineral deposits and strategic position, the balance of power in the sector would shift dramatically. "What's the status of our fleet?" she asked. Battle Group Alpha is at 97% combat readiness. 32 vessels, including the Resolute, Indomitable, and Sovereign. And our position relative to Viridian Prime? We can reach them in approximately 72 hours at maximum FTL. Too long, Voss thought grimly. Whatever was happening at Viridian would be decided long before then. "Admiral," Commander Tanner said hesitantly, "I should remind you that we have no official orders to intervene at Viridian Prime. The Confederation Council has classified this as a frontier dispute, not a direct threat to Earth or the core worlds." "I'm well aware of the Council's position, Commander," Voss replied, her tone cooling several degrees. She was indeed aware, painfully so. For the past 5 years, she had watched as the Confederation gradually abandoned its commitments to the frontier colonies. Budget cuts, redeployments, strategic consolidation of military assets, all bureaucratic euphemisms for a simple truth. The core worlds had decided that defending distant colonies was no longer worth the cost. Voss had argued against this policy shift at every opportunity, earning herself a reputation as troublesome and outmoded in the eyes of the Council. Once considered on track for the position of Fleet Admiral, she now found herself sidelined, commanding a battle group assigned to training exercises, far from any meaningful action. "The Council has advised Viridian Prime to seek a diplomatic solution," Tanner added, almost apologetically. "A diplomatic solution?" Voss nearly laughed. "With Dathra Voss." She turned from the display. Decision made. "Commander, prepare the battle group for immediate departure. Set course for Viridian Prime. Maximum FTL." Tanner's eyes widened. "Admiral, without Council authorization. Our standing orders include responding to credible threats against Confederation interests." Voss interrupted smoothly. "Viridian Prime remains, technically, a Confederation colony, and the presence of the Crimson Scythe clearly constitutes a credible threat." "The Council might not agree with that interpretation, ma'am." "Then the Council can relieve me of command when we return." Voss straightened to her full height, her voice taking on the edge that had earned her the nickname Steel Helena during the Proxima conflict. "But I will not stand by while Confederation citizens are slaughtered because of political calculations made by bureaucrats who've never faced fire." A moment of silence followed her declaration. Then, slowly, Commander Tanner nodded. "Yes, Admiral. I'll issue the orders immediately." "Good. And Tanner." She fixed him with an unwavering gaze. "Anyone who feels uncomfortable with this course of action is free to transfer to the supply vessel returning to Earth. No questions asked. No repercussions." Tanner's posture stiffened with resolve. "That won't be necessary, Admiral. The crew of the Resolute stands with you, as does the rest of Battle Group Alpha." For the first time that day, Voss allowed herself a small smile. "Then let's go save Viridian Prime." As Tanner departed to relay her orders, Voss returned her attention to the holographic display, now showing the strategic layout of the Viridian system. 32 ships against 7 Marauder vessels, on paper. The odds favored Earth's forces. But the Crimson Scythe was no ordinary warship, and Dathra Voss no ordinary adversary. And then, there was the matter of time. Even at maximum FTL, they would be cutting it extraordinarily close. Everything would depend on Viridian's defenders, holding out long enough for the Earth fleet to arrive. "Hold on, Captain Solis," Voss murmured to the empty room. "Help is coming." 18 hours until the Marauder ultimatum expired. 18 hours until Warlord Voss would make good on his threat to demonstrate the Crimson Scythe's capabilities on Viridian's orbital station. In the station's main operations center, Governor Arden stood beside Captain Solis, both of them studying the tactical display that showed the positioning of their meager defense fleet relative to the Marauder vessels. The contrast was stark. The Marauder ships maintained a tight, disciplined formation, while the Viridian defenders were spread thin, attempting to cover too much space with too few resources. "They're toying with us," Arden observed quietly. "They could have attacked at any time over the past 30 hours. Mira nodded grimly. "Psychological warfare. They want us to exhaust ourselves with fear and anticipation before the first shot is even fired." She adjusted the display, highlighting the orbital defense platforms. "But we've made progress. 5 of the 7 platforms are now fully operational, and Dr. Miles has helped identify 3 more saboteurs within our infrastructure teams." 3 more? Arden's eyebrows rose. "That makes 8 total." "All of them infiltrated the colony within the past year," Mira confirmed. "Security is questioning them now, but initial reports suggest they were promised wealth and positions of authority once the Marauders took control." Arden's face darkened with anger. "Betraying their neighbors for personal gain. It's an old story," Mira said, her voice holding no judgment, only a weary understanding born of having seen similar scenarios play out across other frontier worlds. "Fear and greed are powerful motivators." "Speaking of fear," Arden hesitated, lowering his voice further. "The council is divided. Some are pushing for me to accept Voss's terms, give him what he wants, and hope he leaves." "And what do you think, Governor?" Arden's gaze was resolute. "I think that once we show weakness, we'll never know peace again. I think that if we surrender now, everything we've built here, not just the infrastructure and the mines, but the community, the home we've made, it all becomes nothing more than a resource to be exploited." He straightened his shoulders. "I stand by our decision. We fight." A notification chimed on the tactical console, and Lieutenant Reed approached swiftly. "Captain, Governor, we've detected movement from the Marauder fleet. 3 of their escort vessels are breaking formation, moving toward our outer defensive perimeter." Mira's expression sharpened. "They're testing our response capabilities." She activated her communicator. "All defense squadrons. This is Captain Solis. Battle stations. This is not a drill. I repeat, battle stations." Throughout the station and across the scattered defense fleet, alarms sounded as crews rushed to combat readiness. On the tactical display, the 3 Marauder vessels continued their advance, their trajectory calculated to probe the weakest section of Viridian's perimeter. "They'll try to draw out our forces," Mira explained to Arden. "Get us to commit resources so they can assess our strength and tactics. How do we respond?" "Carefully." Mira turned to Reed. "Deploy Squadron 2 to intercept, but maintain defensive posture only. No aggressive maneuvers unless fired upon." Reed relayed the orders, and on the display, 5 small craft, a mix of retrofitted mining ships and patrol vessels, moved to meet the approaching threat. Mira watched intently, analyzing the Marauder approach pattern. "They're being cautious too," she observed. "Standard intimidation formation, but holding back their main weapons." "Testing our nerve as much as our capabilities," Arden said. Minutes stretched into an hour as the 2 forces maintained their standoff, neither side willing to escalate to actual combat. Finally, the Marauder vessels broke off, returning to their fleet's main formation. "They're pulling back," Reed reported, unable to keep a note of relief from his voice. "For now," Mira replied. "This was just the opening move. They're gathering data, looking for weaknesses." She turned to Arden. "Governor, I recommend you return to the surface. When the real attack comes, the station will be their primary target." Arden shook his head firmly. My place is here, Captain. The people need to know their leadership stands with them, not hiding in a bunker planetside. Before Mira could argue further, her personal communicator chirped with an encrypted alert. She stepped away from the tactical display, activating the secure channel. Dr. Alara Miles's face appeared, her expression tense. Captain, I've discovered something in the medical database. Someone's been accessing restricted pharmaceutical formulations, specifically compounds used in vapor-based sedatives. Mira's blood ran cold. When? 3 separate occasions over the past week. The access codes belong to medical technician Rennick, but Rennick has been on leave for the past 2 weeks. I checked the security footage. Whoever used his credentials physically resembles Ensign Chen from engineering. Isolate and secure all pharmaceutical storage areas immediately, Mira ordered. And have security detain Chen, quietly. No alerts that might tip off any other infiltrators. Already done, Alara confirmed. But, Captain, if they were planning to release sedatives through the environmental systems, then we could have lost the entire station without a single shot fired, Mira finished grimly. Excellent work, Doctor. Keep investigating, but watch your back. We don't know how many more saboteurs might be embedded in our ranks. As the communication ended, Mira rejoined Arden at the tactical display, bringing him up to speed on this latest development. They're escalating, she concluded. The probing attack, the attempted sedative theft. They're setting up for something bigger. The ultimatum still stands, Arden reminded her. 17 hours now. Mira's gaze shifted to the imposing silhouette of the crimson scythe on the display. I don't think they'll wait that long. Voss has realized we're not going to surrender, and he's growing impatient. She activated the station-wide communication system. All personnel, this is Captain Solis. Elevated alert status is now in effect. Combat could commence at any moment. All civilian non-essential personnel are to proceed to designated shelter areas. All Defense Force members to battle stations. This is not a drill. As the station hummed with renewed activity, Mira turned to Reed. Deploy the mining drones. Position them in the debris field near the 4th moon, and prepare to activate defense platforms, on my command. Reed nodded, moving swiftly to relay the orders. What are you thinking, Captain? Arden asked quietly. Mira's eyes never left the tactical display. I'm thinking that we need to change the battlefield. Governor. We can't match them for firepower, but we can control when and where the fight happens. A grim smile touched her lips. And I intend to make it happen on our terms. Aboard the Crimson Scythe, Warlord Dathra Voss observed the tactical display with growing irritation. The initial probe had yielded less information than he'd hoped. The Viridian defenders had maintained discipline, revealing little of their overall strategy or capabilities. Their fleet is a joke, sneered his second-in-command, Commander Krell. Retrofitted mining ships and outdated patrol vessels. We could crush them in minutes. Then why haven't we? Voss questioned, his augmented eye glowing faintly as it processed tactical data. Why have our infiltrators encountered such resistance? Why have 8 of our agents been captured within the past day? Krell had no answer for that. Never underestimate desperation, Voss continued, pacing the command deck. These colonists know they have no hope of reinforcement. They know they're outmatched, yet they choose to resist rather than surrender. His mechanical hand clenched into a fist. That makes them dangerous. The sedative plan failed, reported Lieutenant Varga from her communication station. Our operative was apprehended before deployment. Voss dismissed this setback with a wave. A secondary strategy at best. We still hold every advantage. He studied the display once more, noting the positioning of Viridian's orbital defense platforms. They've been busy repairing the systems our saboteurs compromised. Admirable, but futile. Your orders, Warlord? Krell asked. Voss's expression hardened. We've given them enough time to contemplate their doom. Prepare all vessels for combat operations. Target profile. Orbital station first, then defense fleet, then ground installations. And the ultimatum? We still have 16 hours before. The ultimatum was a courtesy. Voss interrupted coldly. I've seen enough to know these colonists won't surrender. So we'll take what we want from the ashes of their resistance. He turned to his weapons officer. Prepare the main cannon for demonstration fire. Target: Viridian's primary communications array. As the Crimson Scythe hummed with battle preparations, Voss allowed himself a small smile of anticipation. Viridian Prime would make an excellent forward base for his expanding operations. Resource-rich, strategically positioned, and soon to be an object lesson to other colonies about the futility of resistance. All ships report ready, Warlord, Krell announced. Excellent. Commence the attack. The energy spike detected from the Crimson Scythe. The sensor operator's voice cut through the tense silence of Viridian Station's command center. Weapon systems powering up across all Marauder vessels. Mira's response was immediate. All defense platforms, activate. Squadron 1 and 3, advance to intercept positions. Squadron 2, hold in reserve behind the orbital platforms. She turned to Arden. Governor, final warning. You should evacuate to the surface. Arden stood his ground. I told you, Captain. I stay. There was no time to argue. On the tactical display, the Marauder fleet had broken its holding pattern, ships moving into attack formation with practiced precision. Incoming fire! Shouted the sensor operator. A brilliant beam of energy lanced from the Crimson Scythe's main cannon, striking Viridian Station's communications array with devastating accuracy. The entire station shuddered from the impact, alarms blaring as emergency systems engaged. Damage report, Mira called over the cacophony. Communications array destroyed, Reed reported grimly. Secondary explosions on decks 7 through 9. Emergency teams responding. Casualty reports incoming. Mira's face hardened. Return fire. All platforms. All squadrons, weapons free. Across space, Viridian's defenders responded. The orbital defense platforms unleashed volleys of plasma torpedoes, while the small craft of Squadrons 1 and 3 launched a coordinated attack run against the nearest Marauder vessels. The battle had begun. Initial exchanges saw 2 Marauder escort ships take damage from the surprisingly accurate fire of Viridian's defense platforms. But the response was swift and devastating. A barrage from the Marauder cruisers obliterated one of the platforms and crippled 3 of Squadron 1's vessels. They're targeting our strongest positions first, Reed observed, his voice tight with tension. As expected, Mira replied. She activated her tactical communicator. Mining drone control. Execute Operation Debris Field now. Across the tactical display, a new element entered the battle. 50 modified mining drones, previously hidden among the debris surrounding Viridian's 4th moon. Suddenly activated, small and nimble, they accelerated toward the Marauder formation, appearing on sensors as nothing more threatening than scattered fragments of rock and metal. Marauder fleet is concentrating fire on our remaining platforms, Reed reported. 2 more squadrons of their fighter craft launching from the cruisers. Mira watched the drones approach with calculated intensity. Hold Squadron 2 in position. Prepare to execute Maneuver Theta on my mark. The mining drones closed with their targets, their true nature still undetected by Marauder sensors, focused on the more obvious threats. When they were less than a kilometer from their targets, Mira gave the command. Detonate. Across the battlefield, the drones exploded in coordinated sequence, engulfing 3 Marauder vessels in clouds of superheated plasma and shrapnel. The explosions weren't powerful enough to destroy the warships, but they disrupted sensors, damaged external weapon systems, and created momentary chaos in the Marauder formation. Squadron 2, execute Maneuver Theta now, Mira ordered. The reserve squadron, Viridian's most combat-capable vessels, emerged from behind the orbital platforms, launching a precision strike against the disoriented Marauder ships. plasma torpedoes, and railgun rounds found their marks with devastating effect. "Direct hits on 2 Marauder cruisers," Reed reported, a note of triumph in his voice. "One is venting atmosphere. The other has lost propulsion." A cheer went up from the command center staff, quickly silenced as the Crimson Scythe responded. The Dreadnought's secondary batteries opened fire, targeting Squadron 2 with ruthless efficiency. 4 of the 7 vessels exploded instantly, the others taking critical damage. "Crimson Scythe advancing on the station," the sensor operator called out, voice cracking with strain. "Main cannon charging for another shot." "Evasive protocols," Mira ordered. The station's thrusters fired, attempting to shift its position enough to avoid a direct hit. But the massive structure was never designed for rapid movement. The Crimson Scythe's main cannon fired again. This time, the beam struck the station's primary power core, sending cascading system failures throughout the structure. Gravity fluctuated wildly, lights failed, and emergency bulkheads slammed shut as sections began to decompress. "Primary power offline," Reed shouted above the alarms. "Switching to emergency systems." Governor Arden staggered against a console as the gravity shifted. "Captain, our people." "Evacuation protocols are automatic," Mira assured him, helping him regain his footing. "But we need to relocate command operations. This section could be targeted next." She turned to Reed. "Status of our fleet?" Reed's expression was grim. "We've lost 11 ships. The remaining defense platforms are still operational, but 3 more Marauder vessels are moving to flank them." Mira made a rapid calculation. They'd hurt the Marauders, damaged 3 ships, possibly disabled 2, but at terrible cost. And the Crimson Scythe itself remained untouched, its overwhelming firepower still focused on the station. "New contacts," the sensor operator suddenly called out. "Multiple signatures at the system's edge." Mira's heart leapt. Could it be? Had her desperate message somehow reached Earth in time? "Identification?" she demanded. The operator's face fell. "Marauder reinforcements. At least 5 vessels. Approaching at high speed." The hope that had flared so briefly within Mira guttered out. Not help arriving, but the final nail in Viridian's coffin. "Captain," Reed said quietly, "we need to consider evacuating the command staff. If the station falls—" "The station will not fall," Mira interrupted, her voice iron. "Not while I still breathe." She straightened, addressing the entire command center. "This is not over. We've hurt them. We've shown them that taking Viridian Prime will cost more than they anticipated. Now we show them it will cost more than they can afford." She turned to the tactical display, mind racing through options, searching for any advantage they might still press. "Reconfigure the remaining defense platforms," she ordered. "Concentrate all fire on the Crimson Scythe's port nacelles. Their shield coverage is weakest there." She activated her communicator. "All remaining vessels. This is Captain Solis. Form up on the following coordinates. Prepare for coordinated attack run on the Crimson Scythe." "Captain," Arden said softly, "that's a suicide mission." Mira met his gaze steadily. "Perhaps, but it's also our best chance to disable their flagship before their reinforcements arrive." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm not giving up, Governor. Not yet." As the remnants of Viridian's defense force regrouped for what might be their final stand, Mira found herself thinking of Admiral Voss. Had her message even reached Earth? And if it had, what difference could it make now? The battle was entering its final phase. Whatever the outcome, Mira Solis was determined that the Marauders would remember Viridian Prime not as an easy conquest, but as the place where resistance became legend. Admiral Helena Voss stood on the bridge of the Resolute, her attention fixed on the massive view screen that displayed the approaching Viridian system. Battle Group Alpha had pushed its engines beyond recommended limits, shaving precious hours off their journey time. Even so, they were cutting it dangerously close. "Status report," she ordered. "We'll reach Viridian Prime in approximately 20 minutes. "Admiral," reported the navigation officer. "Long-range sensors are detecting weapons fire. A battle is definitely in progress." Voss's expression remained composed, but her hands tightened imperceptibly on the command rail. "Configuration of enemy forces. Difficult to determine at this range, but we're detecting at least 12 Marauder signatures. Several appear damaged. The Crimson Scythe is confirmed present and active. 12 Marauder vessels. More than their intelligence had indicated. Voss must have called in reinforcements. The situation was even more dire than they'd anticipated. "Status of Viridian's defenders?" The tactical officer's expression was grim. "Orbital station has sustained heavy damage. Viridian's defense fleet appears to be down to less than 10 operational vessels." They were still fighting, despite overwhelming odds, despite the arrival of Marauder reinforcements. Captain Solis and her people were still holding the line. "Bring the battle group to full combat readiness," Voss ordered. "All vessels to Formation Delta. I want fighters launched the moment we drop out of FTL." As her orders were relayed throughout the fleet, Voss activated a private channel to Commander Tanner. "Is our little surprise ready?" Tanner nodded, a rare smile crossing his features. "Yes, Admiral. The plasma storm generators are primed and ready. The Marauders won't know what hit them." "Good." Voss turned back to the main viewer. "Increase speed to maximum. Every minute counts now." The ships of Battle Group Alpha surged forward. 32 vessels of Earth's finest, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and fighter carriers, all converging on Viridian Prime with a single purpose: to demonstrate that Earth had not abandoned its colonies, regardless of what the Confederation Council might claim. As they approached the final FTL jump point, Voss addressed the entire battle group. "Men and women of Earth Defense Command, we are about to engage an enemy that believes the Confederation has forsaken its frontier worlds. Today, we prove them wrong." Her voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. "Today, we show the Marauders, and all who would threaten our people, that distance means nothing, that the people of Earth stand with our colonies, no matter how far-flung." She paused, her gaze sweeping the bridge crew. "For Viridian Prime." "For Viridian Prime," they responded in unison. "Drop out of FTL on my mark," Voss commanded. 3, 2, 1, mark. On the shattered bridge of the CSV Dauntless, Captain Mira Solis clung to the tactical console as another impact rocked the ship. Around her, damage control teams fought desperately to contain fires and seal breaches, while her remaining bridge crew struggled to keep the vessel's weapons and engines operational. Their suicide run against the Crimson Scythe had achieved partial success. Concentrated fire from the Dauntless and her sister ships had damaged the Dreadnought's port weapons array and disrupted its shield generators. But the cost had been devastating. Of the 8 vessels that had participated in the attack, only 3 remained operational, the Dauntless among them. And now, with Marauder reinforcements arriving, the end seemed inevitable. "Status report," Mira called over the chaos. Lieutenant Reed, his face streaked with blood from a gash on his forehead, checked the tactical display. "Main weapons at 40% capacity, engines at 65%, shields." He grimaced. "Shields are gone, Captain." Mira nodded grimly. "And the Crimson Scythe?" "Damaged but operational. They're repositioning, targeting the station again." Viridian Station, where Governor Arden and thousands of civilians had taken shelter, hung in space, its once gleaming structure now marred by scorch marks and breaches. 3 of its 6 main sections had been evacuated. The remaining 3 packed beyond capacity, with those who couldn't reach the surface in time. "The Marauder reinforcements?" Mira asked. 5 minutes from optimal firing position," Reed reported. "They're moving to encircle the station." 5 minutes. After hours of desperate fighting, that was all the time they had left. Mira straightened, ignoring the pain from her own injuries. "Set course to intercept the reinforcements. Divert all remaining power to engines and forward weapons. Reed stared at her incredulously. Captain, that's... Our duty, Lieutenant, Mira finished for him. If we can delay them even briefly, more civilians might reach the escape pods. Her voice softened slightly. I'm not asking anyone to follow me. Those who wish to evacuate may do so now. A moment of silence fell over the bridge. Then, one by one, her crew returned to their stations, determination replacing despair in their expressions. Course laid in, Captain, reported the navigation officer. Weapons primed, added the tactical officer. Reed straightened, saluting with formal precision. The Dauntless stands ready, Captain. Mira felt a surge of pride so intense it nearly overwhelmed her. Then let's show these marauders what Viridian Prime is made of. A head full. Captain! The sensor operator's voice cracked with sudden urgency. New contacts! Massive energy signatures at the system's edge. Mira's heart sank. More marauder reinforcements? Had Dathra Voss committed his entire fleet to Viridian's destruction? Identification, she demanded. The sensor operator worked frantically at his console, then looked up, his expression transforming from dread to disbelief. Earth signatures, Captain. Earth Defense Command IFF codes. For a moment, Mira couldn't process the words. Earth signatures? Here? Now? Confirmed, Reed breathed, checking the readings himself. Multiple Earth warships dropping out of FTL, battle group configuration. A wild grin spread across his face. It's the Resolute, Captain, Admiral Voss's flagship. A cheer erupted across the bridge, quickly silenced as Mira raised her hand. On screen, she ordered, her voice carefully controlled despite the hope surging through her. The main viewer activated, showing the edge of the Viridian system where space itself seemed to ripple and distort. Then, like avenging angels emerging from the void, the ships of Earth's Battle Group Alpha appeared, gleaming, powerful, and unmistakably hostile to the Marauder forces. Open a channel to the Resolute, Mira commanded, her composure finally cracking as a smile of fierce joy spread across her face. And inform Governor Arden, Earth has arrived. Dathra Voss had never known fear, not true fear, until this moment. One instant, victory had been within his grasp. Viridian Station crippled, the colony's defenses shattered, only token resistance remaining before his forces could begin the final bombardment of the surface. His reinforcements were moving into position, ready to deliver the coup de grace to Captain Solis's pathetic remnant fleet. The next instant, the tactical display had erupted with new signatures, dozens of them, emerging from FTL at the system's edge. Not the disorganized exit of individual vessels, but the perfectly coordinated arrival of a battle group. An Earth battle group. Impossible, he whispered, his augmented eye struggling to process the data. The Confederation Council wouldn't authorize... Warlord, his communications officer interrupted. We're being hailed. It's the Resolute. The Resolute, Admiral Helena Voss's flagship, the hero of the Proxima conflict, the woman who had broken the back of the Centauri rebellion with tactics so brilliant and ruthless that even Voss had studied them. On screen, he ordered, fighting to keep his voice steady. The communication activated, revealing the austere features of Admiral Voss herself, resplendent in the midnight blue uniform of Earth Defense Command. Her expression was one of cold, implacable purpose. Warlord Dathra Voss, she began without preamble. This is Admiral Helena Voss of the Earth Defense Command. You are engaged in hostile actions against Confederation citizens and property. You will power down your weapons, recall your fighters, and prepare to be boarded. Failure to comply will result in your immediate destruction. Voss forced a sneer. You're bluffing, Admiral. The Confederation Council has no interest in frontier disputes. They made that quite clear when they withdrew their military presence from these systems. Something dangerous flickered in Voss's eyes. "I'm not here representing the Council, Warlord. I'm here representing Earth. And Earth does not abandon its people." Her voice hardened further. "You have 60 seconds to comply. After that, we will open fire." The communication ended abruptly, leaving Voss staring at his suddenly silent bridge crew. "Orders, Warlord?" Commander Krell ventured after a moment. Voss's mind raced through options, calculations, possibilities. His fleet was damaged from the unexpectedly fierce resistance of Viridian's defenders. The Crimson Scythe itself had taken hits to its propulsion and weapon systems. Against a fresh, fully equipped Earth battle group, led by Admiral Voss herself. "Tactical assessment," he demanded. His tactical officer swallowed visibly. Earth forces include 3 battleships, 7 cruisers, 12 destroyers, and at least 10 support vessels. Fighter squadrons launching now. She paused. "Our damaged vessels won't survive the first exchange. Warlord, even at full strength, we would be significantly outmatched." "We could use the colony as leverage," suggested Krell. "Threaten to bombard the surface if they attack." "Against Voss?" Voss shook his head. "She'd call our bluff, then hunt down every survivor personally." He had studied the Admiral's career closely enough to know that she would consider such a threat an additional reason for annihilation, not a deterrent. 40 seconds remaining, Warlord, reported the communications officer nervously. Voss made his decision. "All vessels, disengage and prepare for emergency FTL jump. Recall fighters immediately." As his officers rushed to comply, he added, "Set course for the Karsus Nebula. We'll regroup there." "And the Crimson Scythe, Warlord?" Krell asked. "Our FTL drive was damaged in the attack." Voss's mechanical hand clenched into a fist. "Divert power from all non-essential systems. Strip the secondary weapons arrays if necessary. We need enough FTL capability for at least one jump." As his crew worked frantically to prepare the damaged dreadnought for escape, Voss turned his attention back to the tactical display. The Earth vessels were moving into attack formation with practiced precision, fighters forming screening patterns, capital ships aligning for maximum weapons coverage. 20 seconds, Warlord, the communications officer announced. On the display, Voss could see his fleet breaking formation, vessels turning away from Viridian Prime as they prepared for FTL jumps. Some would make it. Others, too damaged to escape, would face Earth's wrath alone. "FTL drive at minimal functionality," reported the engineering officer. "We can manage one jump, but I can't guarantee how far." "It will have to be enough," Voss decided. "Prepare to—" "Energy surge detected from the Earth fleet," the sensor officer interrupted, alarm evident in her voice. "Some kind of plasma wave forming." Before Voss could respond, space between the fleets rippled with blue-white energy. A massive wave of plasma erupted from emitters on the Earth vessels, expanding outward at tremendous speed. "Evasive maneuvers!" Voss shouted, but it was too late. The plasma wave engulfed the nearest Marauder ships, overloading their shields and frying electronic systems. The wave continued expanding, catching vessel after vessel in its destructive path. When it reached the Crimson Scythe, the dreadnought shuddered violently. Consoles exploded across the bridge, sending crew members flying. Emergency lighting flickered on as primary systems failed. "Damage report," Voss demanded, pulling himself back to his feet. "FTL drive offline," reported the engineering officer, her voice shaking. "Weapon systems offline, shields offline. We're running on emergency power only." On the tactical display, now reduced to a flickering, partial image, Voss watched as Earth fighters swarmed around his crippled fleet. 3 of his vessels had already been destroyed. Others were surrendering, and the remainder were being systematically disabled by precision fire. The Crimson Scythe, his pride, his symbol of power, now floated helpless in space, at the mercy of Admiral Voss. "Warlord," the communications officer said quietly, "we're being hailed again." Voss straightened his posture, determined to face his defeat with dignity, if nothing else. On screen, this time, the communication showed not only Admiral Voss, but Captain Mira Solis as well, standing side by side on the bridge of the Resolute. "Warlord Voss," Voss began, her voice carrying the weight of judgment. "Your fleet is defeated. Your vessel is crippled. Surrender now, and your crew will be treated according to Confederation protocols for prisoners of war." Voss managed a bitter laugh. "And what of me, Admiral? What special punishment have you devised for the notorious Dathra Voss?" "Justice," Mira Solis answered, her eyes hard as stone. "For Viridian Prime and every other colony you've terrorized. A trial before a Confederation tribunal, with full accountability for your actions." Voss considered his options. Suicide was always a possibility. Many Marauder warlords had chosen that path, rather than capture. But something in him rebelled against such an end. Perhaps it was pride, or perhaps simple curiosity about what might come next. "Very well," he said finally. "I surrender the Crimson Scythe and all remaining Marauder vessels. But know this, Captain Solis, Admiral Voss, today's events will not go unnoticed. The Confederation Council will not thank you for acting without their authorization." A cold smile touched Voss's lips. "I didn't do this for the Council's thanks, Warlord. I did it because it was right." She nodded to someone off-screen. "Boarding parties are en route to your vessel. I suggest you prepare your crew for the transition of command." As the communication ended, Dathra Voss gazed around his shattered bridge one last time. The Crimson Scythe would become a prize of war, his crew prisoners, his grand ambitions reduced to ashes. But somehow, amid the ruin of his plans, a thought surfaced that almost made him laugh. Captain Mira Solis, with her retrofitted frigates and desperate courage, had not only held out against impossible odds, she had changed the course of frontier history. The colonies, long neglected by the Confederation Council, had found a champion in Admiral Voss and the Earth Defense Command. And that, Voss realized, might prove more disruptive to the established order than anything he himself had ever accomplished. The Grand Assembly Hall of Viridian Prime was filled beyond capacity. Colonists packed the main floor and balconies, while hundreds more gathered in the plaza outside, watching the proceedings on massive view screens. The atmosphere hummed with excitement, relief, and profound gratitude. At the front of the hall, Governor Cale Arden stood at the podium, his normally reserved demeanor giving way to unabashed emotion as he addressed his people. "1 week ago, we faced annihilation," he began, his voice carrying throughout the hall. "1 week ago, we stood alone against the most feared Marauder fleet in the frontier, with nothing but our courage and determination to sustain us." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembly. "Today, we stand here not only as survivors, but as the founders of a new chapter in the history of the frontier colonies." Applause thundered through the hall, echoed by the crowds outside. When it finally subsided, Arden continued, "The Battle of Viridian Prime has already become legend across the frontier systems. Not just for the arrival of Earth's mightiest Armada, when all seemed lost, but for the hours before, when ordinary citizens became extraordinary heroes, when miners became soldiers, when we all stood together and declared that this colony would not fall." On the stage behind him sat the honored guests. Captain Mira Solis, still bearing the marks of battle but standing proud in her formal uniform. Admiral Helena Voss, resplendent in the full dress uniform of Earth Defense Command, and representatives from a dozen frontier colonies who had traveled to Viridian Prime for this historic occasion. The Confederation Council has, predictably, expressed its concern over Admiral Voss's unilateral action. Arden continued, a hint of wry amusement entering his tone. "They speak of protocols violated, of chain of command disregarded. To which I say," he paused deliberately, Thank the stars for Admiral Helena Voss and the brave men and women of Earth Defense Command. Another roar of approval filled the hall. On stage, Admiral Voss maintained her composure, though the slight upturn at the corner of her mouth suggested she appreciated the sentiment. But the Council's reaction has made one thing abundantly clear, Arden went on, his tone becoming more serious. We cannot rely on distant bureaucrats to secure our future, which brings me to the true purpose of today's assembly. He gestured to Captain Solis, who rose and joined him at the podium. She carried a data slate, which she handed to the governor with formal ceremony. Today, Arden announced, representatives from 27 frontier colonies have agreed to the formation of the Frontier Defense Pact, a mutual aid alliance dedicated to the collective security of all member worlds. He held up the data slate. With the full support and partnership of Earth Defense Command, we will establish a unified defense force, shared early warning systems, and rapid response protocols. Mira stepped forward to the microphone. As the newly appointed commander of the Frontier Defense Force, I can tell you that our work has already begun. The captured Marauder vessels are being repurposed for our fleet. Training programs are being established. And Admiral Voss has committed Earth Defense Command to a permanent presence in frontier space, regardless of the Council's position. The applause that followed was deafening. As it gradually subsided, Admiral Voss rose and approached the podium. The hall fell instantly silent. Such was the respect commanded by the woman who had become, overnight, the frontier's greatest champion. What happened at Viridian Prime was not just a military engagement, Voss began, her clear voice carrying to every corner of the hall. It was a statement of principle, a declaration that distance does not diminish responsibility, that being far from Earth does not make you any less worthy of protection. She paused, her gaze sweeping the assembly. The Confederation was founded on the ideal that humanity stands stronger together than apart. Somewhere along the way, the Council forgot that. Earth has not. She turned slightly, acknowledging Captain Solis with a respectful nod. But let us be clear about one thing. The true heroes of Viridian Prime are not those who arrived at the end. They are those who stood firm when all seemed lost. Those who, against all odds, against all reason, refused to surrender. Captain Solis, Governor Arden, Dr. Miles, Lieutenant Reed, and every citizen who took up arms to defend their home. Voss straightened to her full height, her voice taking on the commanding tone that had guided Earth's forces through countless conflicts. The Marauders thought no one would come to your aid. They were wrong. And any who threaten the frontier colonies in the future will discover the same truth. You are not alone. You will never be alone again. As the assembly erupted in thunderous applause and cheers, Mira Solis found herself blinking back unexpected tears. She thought of the desperate hours aboard the Dauntless, of the lives lost, of the moment when she had been certain that Viridian Prime would fall. And then she thought of the sight that had appeared on her view screen, Earth's mightiest Armada, arriving like avenging angels just when all hope seemed lost. Later, as the formal ceremonies concluded and the celebration began in earnest, Mira found a moment of quiet with Admiral Voss on a balcony overlooking the colony's main plaza. The Council is still threatening to court-martial you, Mira observed, leaning against the railing beside the Admiral. Voss smiled slightly. Let them try. Half of Earth's population has been following the story of Viridian Prime. The vids of your stand against the Crimson Scythe have been viewed billions of times. If the Council moves against me now, they'll face a political backlash that would make the Proxima riots look like a minor disagreement. Still, Mira said, you risked everything. Your career, your reputation, all for a frontier colony most people on Earth have never heard of. I risked nothing that matters, Voss replied simply. Honor, duty, the principles that should guide every officer worthy of the uniform. She turned to face Mira directly. When I received your message, there was no choice to make. only a course to set. Below them, the celebration continued, music and laughter rising from the plaza, where colonists danced and feasted, their fears finally put to rest. "What happens now?" Mira asked, after a comfortable silence. "The marauders are defeated, but not destroyed. The council is unhappy. The frontier is still vulnerable in 100 different ways." "Now," Voss said, her eyes reflecting the determination that had carried her across light years to Viridian's aid, "we build something new. Something better than what came before." She gestured to the scene below them. "These people believed they were abandoned, forgotten. They discovered they were not. That knowledge changes everything." Mira nodded slowly, understanding the truth of the Admiral's words. The battle had been won, yes, but more importantly, a new alliance had been forged. Earth and the frontier colonies, united by choice rather than bureaucratic decree. "To new beginnings, then," she said, raising her glass in toast. Voss smiled fully then, touching her glass to Mira's. "To Viridian Prime, and to those who stand watch, no matter how distant the stars." As night fell over the colony, the lights of the Earth flagship Resolute gleamed in orbit above, not departing, but maintaining its vigil, a symbol of the promise made and kept. No one left behind. Not now. Not ever again.